privilege to talk to you, of course. Now, Bath is a magic place. It is located in a deep valley surrounded by attractive hills, and it has its 3 hot springs, which are unique in Britain. And these qualities have inspired writers for centuries, both those who record facts and those who like to tell a good tale in poetry, theatre plays, and especially in novels. I'm going to talk to you about creative writing, stories that do not intend to give an accurate account of what Bath was like at any time in the past, but rather give us an insight into what people thought about Bath. And in turn, of course, they reinforced notions of the city. These stories are populated with fictional characters that are often stereotypes or even caricatures, and many are still highly entertaining to read today. Almost all of the literature output that we have today is in some way linked to Bath's golden age, the long 18th century, as it is sometimes referred to, the period between 1700 and about 1830. Bath tends to appear there as a holiday destination where people only stay for a while. Until the 20th century, Bath residents themselves are only marginal figures. Central to the plots are the visitors and their crazy behaviors. Many of these works have entered the literary canon and would merit a detailed analysis in themselves. That was not possible in a 1-hour talk, where I will just show you highlights and common themes. So I'm now going to take you on a tour of Bath through the ages, through the eyes of storytellers. I want the next page. I have to just do reboot this because it's not big.
It's not one page.
Okay, let me just save this. Okay. Right, so I'm coming back to you, and now I'm sharing my screen from the start. Okay, from the beginning. Now, that's better. The oldest tale, that's the one about Bladud. It goes back to the oral tradition of storytelling, and Geoffrey of Monmouth, a Welsh nobleman, is credited with an early attempt of writing it down in his History of the Kings of Britain in about 1136. But for him, let's be honest, it was impossible to separate fact from fiction in his account. Entertaining listeners with a good tale invites embroidering it, and that would have happened many times over. So the modern version, which all Bath tour guides still tell visitors today, is owed to John Wood, who based on it his vision of rebuilding the city to imagined ancient splendor in a description of Bath, which was published in 1765 in Bath's golden age. So whether Bladud really existed, was sent to Athens to be educated, afflicted with leprosy, reduced to being a swineherd, and cured by the healing powers of the bubbling springs, we will never know. Bear the story in mind, though, because Charles Dickens presents us with a great alternative version, and I'll come to that much later on in the talk. Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, written sometime between 1345 and 1400, prove that Bath was definitely on the medieval map of England, even if the wife of Bath's tale is not actually set in the city. At that point in time, Bath was a place of pilgrimage, offering the curative hot springs to its visitors. It was also a significant place where wool was refined and marketed. And so the wife of Bath not only had 5 husbands all at the church door and traveled to places as far as Jerusalem, but she was also highly skilled. In making cloth, she had so great a bent, she bettered those of Ypres and of Ghent. Her tales shows her to be an early feminist, I think. It's about a lusty young knight who's learning a tough lesson on the question of what is the thing that women most desire. In case you wanted to know what the answer is, the self-same sovereignty over her husband as over her lover, and master him, he must not be above her. For a few hundred years then, Bath appears mostly in a few travel accounts. But then, in the tradition of the Restoration comedies, a comedy in 5 acts and in prose, it says, by someone called Thomas Durfee, who came from the West Country. And it was performed in London's Theatre Royal, the Drury Lane, in 1701. And it was entitled The Bath. This play shows that at the start of the 18th century, Bath already had a thriving spa culture, and it makes fun of the behaviours of the visitors who came. The very name of the characters suggests that they are caricatures, representing a range of social classes. The company, as the visitors used to be referred to in Bath, consists of wealthy families with their sons, daughters, and servants, as well as a few single men and women. There is the family of the upwardly mobile Sir Oldgame, a great manager in city affairs and East India stock. There's Sir Codshead, a traditional country squire who has come with 2 sons squabbling over their inheritance. And the plot is then mostly about arranged marriages. First, young Sophronia Oldgame becomes the wife of Lord Lovechase. What a wonderful name. He's another country squire. And then next, the lodging house lady, where they all stay, arranges a match between the Western lass, Gillian Homebred, who is described as a country gentlewoman of £6,000. Fancy that, quite a catch. And the gentleman, the lucky fellow who marries her in the end is a lodger who pretends to be a captain of the army, but actually just looks after Lord Lovechase's horses. In the early 1700s, marriage for money and status arranged by others was still just about acceptable in public opinion. In the following decades, arranged marriages fell from favour, and so perhaps did this play. In the opening scene at the King's Bath, of which I've given you a little illustration here, the famous engraving, we have quite a lot of lewd and rowdy behaviour among the bathers. They are only just about kept in check by a sergeant of the bath, as they used to have them. He complains that a man called Harebrained, again a beautiful name, has yet again caused a disturbance. And this is how the play says it. He will souse into the bath stark naked as ever he was a boar, and if there ever be a plump Londoner there, a fat-shouldered lass or so, he's on the back of her in a trice. That doesn't leave anything much to the imagination. So what did one do in Bath in 1701, according to the play? Well, apart from bathing in the hot waters, taking it as a medicinal drink at the rate of 9 pint glasses per day, taking a little stroll, gambling and getting drunk in a tavern, not a lot, except for getting married, of course. This play already has many of the features that reappear in the literature of Bath later in the 18th century. It is a satire, which was at the time considered a means of educating people. It presents Bath as a place where health benefits of the mineral springs became increasingly preceded by the amusements it offered, and especially by its reputation as a marriage market. As Daniel Defoe put it cynically, after visiting Bath sometime between 1724 and 1727, it is a resort of the sound rather than the sick. Talking of Daniel Defoe, who is widely considered one of the early writers of a new form of literature, which we now know as the novel. His Robinson Crusoe, of course, remains a classic worldwide. But in 1722, he published another novel called The Fortunes and Misfortunes of the Famous Moll Flanders. The story is told by Moll Flanders herself in a humorous tone, but with the clear message, "Don't do as I did, girls." The novel charts Moll's journey through life from her birth in Newgate Prison, being taken advantage of as a teenager and moving from place to place. It's a sort of female version of the Pilgrim's Progress, really. Like the wife of Bath, she has 5 husbands in the course of time, but not all at the church door, as well as a few lovers. And after husband number 3 in Virginia, who turns out to be her brother, she decides to take up lodgings in Bath for a while in the hope of finding another husband. Unfortunately, she discovers Bath is the wrong place. There, men find a mistress sometimes, but very rarely look for a wife, she remarks wryly. As in the play 20 years earlier, it is the lodging house landlady who facilitates Moll's relationship with a complete gentleman, who is, however, a married man. And the landlady also arranges for 4 of the best citizen wives of Bath, I think that's midwives in modern terms, to assist Moll with the birth of the illegitimate child from this relationship. That apparently was also part of Bath's reputation. And then, from the 1730s, Bath transformed itself into England's premier resort outside London, and writers in large numbers took an interest in it. Some authors may have just read and heard about the city, some were visitors, and some settled here. Their fictional visitors comment on the splendid new parades, squares, circus, and crescents built to John Wood's grand designs that make Bath a World Heritage City today. Interestingly, none refer to the fact that Bath must have been full of building sites at the time during this period. Apparently, none of the writers saw narrative potential in this feature. The fictional characters come from and mingle with the aristocracy, country gentry, army and navy, as well as the growing class of those who had become wealthy through commerce. They usually bring some servants along, and occasionally they meet with local traders. The upper classes are therefore well overrepresented. They sample the amusements in the dedicated new buildings, which I've circled in orange on the map. They visit the assembly rooms, which were on the site of the traffic island near the parade gardens. So I'm talking about these assembly rooms in the first instance. And from the 1790s, in the current assembly rooms up by the circus. And they, of course, congregate in the pump room or its precursors. The current pump room is about the 3rd one in the same location. They also reflect on the social life that had become strictly regulated by Bath's self-styled master of ceremonies, Beau Nash, and his successors. Cervantes' 1615 novel Don Quixote, I think is how you pronounce it in English, was hugely popular in the 18th century. One of the earliest novels to depict the new Bath and its social life is The Female Quixote, or The Adventures of Arabella, by Charlotte Lennox, published in 1752. Now, Arabella has been brought up in the seclusion of a castle somewhere in rural England by her widowed father. By the standards of the time, she is well educated and has the free run of her father's library. Like the Spanish hero, Arabella, though, reads too many French romantic tales of antiquity. and as a result, she expects life to be full of heroic adventures, where a girl is in constant danger of being ravished, unless she is rescued by a valiant knight who eventually, after further heroic deeds, gains her heart. When confronted with behavior and expectations of ordinary people, Arabella is not really able to understand. And she doesn't understand the idea of fashion for clothes in contemporary times either. And that, of course, leads to some hilarious misadventures. Arabella is meant to be marrying her sensible cousin, Mr. Glanville, and he decides that she needs to be exposed to the real world, and so he goes travelling with Arabella together with his sister and his father for propriety, and their first destination is Bath. Here, Arabella causes a stir on her first morning in the pump room. She appears with a black veil in front of her face, like the ladies in her romantic novels. We get a vivid account of the response of the company to her exotic outfit. The attention of most part of the company was immediately engaged by the appearance Lady Bella made. Strangers are here most strictly criticized, and every new object affords a delicious feast of raillery and scandal. Nothing much has changed, really, let's be honest. The ladies comment on the singularity of her dress, and the men were struck with her figure. Once word has got round, though, that Arabella is the daughter of the deceased Marquis of, and we never get told what the name is, the tone changes. The men, hearing she was a great heiress, found greater beauties to admire in her person. The ladies, awed by the sanction of quality, dropped their ridicule on her dress. And echoes of this particular scene can actually be found in Jane Austen's novels as well. This novel also deals with the custom of having a ball gown made at Bath, according to the latest fashion. And this one makes for a hilarious conversation with a local mantua maker or dressmaker, as she would now be called. Arabella stuns this Bath lady with her request for a robe in the style of the Princess Julia, who apparently lived 2,000 years ago. The dressmaker tells her that that taste was quite out. She quits and tells all her other clients about this strange lady's ideas of fashion. When Arabella makes her entrance at the assembly rooms in her own creation, a robe, shock horror, without a hoop. This is the mid-18th century we're talking about. There's a lot of whispering. We have, of course, again in Jane Austen's novels, a reference to gowns having to be made specially for Bath. It's not clear whether Charlotte Lennox ever came to Bath, but Tobias Smollett, a Scot by birth, certainly did, and Bath features in two of his novels. The first one is The Adventures of Roderick Random. It was published in 1748, and it tells the story of a young man who's well-schooled but otherwise neglected by his family and has to seek his fortune. There were quite a few such stories around at the time. Roderick has fallen in love with Narcissa, but she's not allowed to marry a poor nobody, and so Roderick is having to struggle a little. He forever loses at gambling, and when he hears of an heiress of £20,000, there's a bit of inflation going on here, and the heiress is called Miss Snapper, he follows her to Bath. And again, we are taken to the assembly rooms. This time, we actually meet Beau Nash himself. And he asks Miss Snapper if she could inform him of the name of Tobit's dog, which sounds really quite a rude question. She, however, wins the day with her answer. His name was Nash, and an impudent dog he was. Apparently, this was an allusion to an anecdote about Nash, and maybe someone among the audience can confirm that. Apart from that, Roderick spends his time at Bath unsuccessfully trying to pursue his beloved Narcissa, who also happens to be there, as well as drinking and playing cards against card sharps, and that theme recurs. Published in 1771, near the end of his life, Smollett's Expedition of Humphrey Clinker is an epistolary novel about a journey through Bath. That means a novel in letters. And this type of novel was made popular in England by Samuel Richardson, who did also visit Bath. It has the advantage that we get perspectives of Bath from the letters of 5 different members of that expedition. They are Mr. Matthew Bramble, a grumpy old country squire, his niece, his sister, his nephew, and the maid. They not only comment on the social life, but also on the architecture that had by then come to epitomize Bath. Now, the niece feels enchanted, just as the advertising literature of the day suggests she should. Bath, she says, is an earthly paradise. The square, the circus, and the parades put you in mind of the sumptuous palaces represented in prints and pictures. The maid is showing off to her friend with the fancy places she has seen, but her spelling requires a little bit of imagination. She says, I've seen the parades, the squires, and the circus, the crescent, the hot one, and bloody buildings. You can work out what she actually means, can't you? Old Mr. Bramble, by contrast, is not at all impressed. The square, though irregular, is on the whole pretty well laid out, spacious, open and airy. But the avenues to it are mean, dirty, dangerous and indirect, he moans. The circus is a pretty bauble, contrived for show and looks like Vespasian's amphitheatre turned outside in. It is inconvenient from its situation at so great a distance from all the markets, baths, and places of public entertainment. And Mr. Bramble is absolutely scathing about the new work in progress. A crescent. When that is finished, we shall probably have a star, and those who are living 30 years hence may perhaps see all the signs of the zodiac exhibited in architecture at Bath. Let us hope that John Wood, the younger, had a strong sense of humour when he read that. The novelist Fanny Burney visited Bath in the late 1700s. She lived in the city for a few years in the early 1800s and is actually buried by St. Swithin's Church. In Evelina, or The History of a Young Lady's Entrance into the World, another epistolary novel published in 1778, the prim and proper heroine expresses some reservations about Bath. On a day out from the neighbouring resort, Clifton Hotwells, in the company of her future husband, Lord Orville, and friends. She thinks the crescent, the prospect from it, and the elegant symmetry of the circus delighted me. The parades have somewhat lost their charm, but the North Parade still affords a beautiful prospect, a charming view of Prior Park and of the Avon, and indeed it still does. Looking out of the pump room windows, though, Evelina is shocked with the public exhibition of the ladies in the Bath. She feels the very idea of being seen in such a situation by whoever pleases to look is indelicate. And Lord Orville has a low opinion of Bath's amusements. He thinks they have a sameness in them, which after a short time renders them insipid. His greatest objection to Bath, though, is the encouragement it gives to gamesters. You have to bear in mind that gamblers at Bath were in such elite company as the Duchess of Devonshire. Gambling still persisted in spite of the efforts to restrict it with a succession of laws passed by Parliament. I'm showing you here an engraving of the pump room in the mid-1700s, and you can see what the pump room looks like and see how Evelina could actually watch, and everybody else could watch still the bathers in the bath, who were, however, wearing bathing gowns, I might like to remind you as well. No account of the literature featuring Bath would be complete without mentioning Christopher Anse's New Bath Guide, published in 1766. Christopher Anse actually came to live out his life in Bath, and he stayed in the Royal Crescent, of course. His New Bath Guide, or Memoirs of the, and you see Blunderhead family, the letters, they're kind of dashes there, so you have to guess what the full name was, but it has been identified as Blunderhead, which speaks volumes. It is a spoof of the official New Bath Guide, published for visitors in 1762, just a few years before, to provide information about the city's history, amenities, and social activities. Anste's work was hugely popular in its day, and it presents basically different perspectives on a holiday in Bath, again in epistolary form, but this time in comic verse. The correspondents are the dim-witted young country squire, Mr. Simpkin, Blunderhead, his sister, his cousin, and their maid. They're all fresh from the country, and here is Miss Master Simpkin's first impression of Bath, and I'm sure you've seen it somewhere before. Of all the gay places the world can afford, by gentle and simple for pastime adored, fine balls and fine concerts, fine buildings and springs, fine walks and fine views, and 1,000 fine things, not to mention the sweet situation and air, what place, my dear mother, with Bath can compare? A fine study in hyperbole, and who would argue with him even today? However, the letters expose the elegance on show as merely a facade. Behind it, naive young girls fall prey to men posing as aristocrats when they're actually just Roger the Lodger. Rich men are exploited by greedy medical professionals. In the little illustration there, you see Simpkin, Master Simpkin, being scandalized by the doctor's diagnostic techniques. He said, "But I thought I should faint when I saw him, dear mother, feel my pulse with one hand with a watch in the other." And women in this place are so obsessed with fashion and accessories that there's an ode to Moira, the goddess of folly. And then the water in the king's bath. It is served as a medicinal drink in the pump room. So while little Tabby was washing her rump, the ladies kept drinking it out of the pump. Some things seem to not have changed very much since Thomas Turvey's play in 1701. And talking of plays, Bath is the setting of Richard Brinsley Sheridan's comedy of manners, The Rivals, premiered at London's Covent Garden Theatre in 1775 and still a firm favourite on stage today. As in Thomas Durfey's play, the storyline focused on Bath as a marriage market, with the chief characters drawn from the wealthy elite, but servants also play important roles. In fact, it is a servant who explains the daily routine for visitors at Bath. "In the morning, we go to the pump room, though neither my master nor I drink the waters. After breakfast, we saunter on the parades, or play a game at billiards. At night, we dance." He's not enjoying it. "Damn the place. I'm tired of it. Their regular hours stupefy me. Not a fiddle nor a card after 11. And nobody wears a wig anymore. He finds that shocking too. The plot centres around a young lady called Lydia Languish. You see her there on the photo reclined on the sofa. And she, like Arabella, the female Quixote, enjoys reading romantic novels and has developed fanciful ideas about marrying a poor man for love rather than money. Apparently at Bath, novels fly from the shelves of the circulating libraries so fast that Lydia's maid can hardly get hold of them. Humphrey Clinker, though, is one of the titles brought back and hidden away so that she could just leave Fordyce's sermons open on the table, because Lydia's aunt, Mrs. Malaprop, the famous Mrs. Malaprop, does not approve of young ladies acquiring knowledge by reading too much. She's famous, of course, for her malapropisms, and this aunt believes that circulating libraries are vile places. She believes a girl merely needs to learn a little ingenuity and artifice, have a supercilious knowledge of in accounts and orthodoxy that she might not misspell and mispronounce words. The principle of marrying for love prevails in the end for Lydia and even for Mrs. Malaprop, who becomes the wife of the wonderful, the only Sir Lucius O'Trigger. In the 1790s, Bath's golden age was drawing to a close. The city's resort culture was falling out of fashion with elite visitors who preferred the newly developing seaside resorts of Brighton and Weymouth. Bath retained its attraction as a holiday destination for a while for the lesser gentry and the aspiring middle classes. Increasingly, it came to be viewed as a genteel place of permanent residence as well. No author captures this transition better than Jane Austen in her two novels set in Bath, published together in 4 volumes in 1818, but written at least 13 years apart from each other, according to the advertisement by the authoress at the start of the first volume. Jane Austen, of course, visited Bath in 1797 and 1799, and she lived here between 1801 and 1806 at several addresses, and therefore acquired extensive first-hand knowledge of the city, which she used in the 2 novels to good effect. Most of her other novels, of course, refer to Bath in some way as well. Significantly, Jane Austen would also have read most or even all the literary works that I've mentioned so far. The earlier and highly satirical novel, Northanger Abbey, is about another young lady's entrance into the world, and there are parallels with Arabella, the female Quixote. Catherine Morland, eldest daughter of a down-to-earth country clergyman and his wife, has been brought up in the sheltered environment of rural Wiltshire. Like Arabella, she derives her knowledge of the world beyond from romantic novels, in this case by contemporary British authors such as Fanny Burney and Mrs. Radcliffe. So she too is in need of a reality check. Catherine is excited to be invited on her very first holiday to Bath in the company of the wealthy Mr. and Mrs. Allen. They arrived at Bath. Catherine was all eager delight. She was come to be happy, and she felt happy already. During her stay, we revisit with her some familiar amenities and a few additions. In the pump room, the modern replacement by Thomas Baldwin by now, and she makes new friends who turn out to be false friends. Her first ball at the more recent upper assembly rooms, for which she is very well prepared with a gown newly made in town, is a disappointment. But at the lower assembly rooms, the master of ceremonies, a successor of Monash, properly introduces her to the young man who eventually becomes her husband. He makes fun of the regimented social timetable at Bath, where visitors expect to attend the upper rooms on Monday, the theatre on Tuesday, a concert on Wednesday, and the lower rooms on Friday, in accordance with the New Bath Guide, the proper one. And at the weekend, Jane Austen adds later, every Sunday throughout the season, as soon as divine service was over, and after staying long enough in the pump room, they hastened away to the Crescent to breathe the fresh air of better company. For a little variety, tourists of the 1790s also explore Bath's surrounding area, walking up to the beechen cliff, driving up to the sham castle, and even as far as Clifton in Bristol, in a mirror image to Evelina. Each of these outings forms a significant event in the story. The tone of Jane Austen's last completed novel, Persuasion, is a more serious one, but it's not without humour. Anne Elliot, the heroine of Persuasion, is a more mature lady and stays in Bath in the early 1800s, when it is past its prime. Her father, Sir Walter Elliot of Kellynch Hall, can no longer afford to live in his ancestral home, so he has to rent it out to Admiral Croft and take a house in Bath, because he might there be important at comparatively little expense. The new address, you can see it there on the picture, is at Camden Place, now called Camden Crescent, described as a lofty, dignified situation, such as becomes a man of consequence, which is an allusion to its location on a steep hill at quite a different distance from the city centre. In fact, walking up the hill is found to be quite toilsome by Anne Elliot herself. Perhaps Jane Austen also chose this address knowing that Camden Place, during its construction, lost 9 houses in a landslide. Like Sir Walter's finances and general situation, it is built on somewhat shaky grounds. In Persuasion, there are no more visits to the pump room or to any balls. The upper assembly rooms have become the venue for a serious concert here. Social life for the upper classes now seems to consist otherwise of evening parties at home. John Wood's masterpieces have become old-fashioned. In fact, Henrietta and Louisa Musgrove tell their father, "If we go to Bath, Papa, we must be in a good situation. None of your Queen squares for us." Those down on their luck, like Anne Elliot's friend Mrs. Smith, have to make do with cheap lodgings here in Westgate Buildings near the infamous Avon Street district. But he gets an insight into the world of the local servants, with Nurse Rook, who looks after Mrs. Smith and supplies her with delicious gossip from the rumour mill among the servants. Bath also still fulfills the expectation of a happy end between Anne Elliot and Captain Wentworth. We get, in fact, the exact setting of the marriage proposal, which is a letter written surreptitiously at the White Hart Inn. That's on the site of the modern shops, of course, opposite in Stall Street, opposite the Bath Abbey enclosure. And Elliot accepts him on the gravel walk leading up to the Royal Crescent, which was known as a lover's lane in former times. About 20 years later, at the end of the Georgian era, just before the arrival of the railways, Charles Dickens visited Bath as a parliamentary reporter in 1835. His debut novel, The Pickwick Papers, was published in installments between 1836 and 1837, and it describes in issue number 12 the Bath holiday of the elderly Mr. Pickwick, who was the president of the fictional Pickwick Club in London. Here, Bath appears to be stuck in a bygone age. All the rituals established in the 18th century have been very carefully preserved. On arrival at the White Hart Inn, after only 11 hours on the coach from London, Mr. Pickwick and his companions are welcomed by the fabulously pompous master of ceremonies called Angelo Cyrus Bantam, Esquire. Mr. Pickwick is still expected to sign the arrivals book in the pump room, ornamented with Corinthian pillars, we are told. That's probably a quote from the guidebook. He drinks his quarter-pint glasses of the water there every day and pretends to feel its benefit. His servant Samuel, who is a bit more honest, he finds the water particularly unpleasant and with a strong flavour of warm flat irons. The assembly rooms on a ball night are still a scene of gaiety, glitter and show, but the company are quite vulgar people, even if they are titled, like Lord Muttonhead and the Dowager Lady Snuffanoff. Mr. Pickwick, whom we see there on the illustration, is too old for the dance floor, and so he's assigned to a trio of matrons who will outsmart him at a game of cards while they're hoping their daughters will find rich husbands in the ballroom. On the other hand, we get another perspective on Bath's servant world, when Samuel is invited to a dinner of boiled mutton with all the trimmings as the guest of the local footmen. These footmen all turn up in powdered wigs and brightly coloured liveries long out of fashion. They talk in the posh English they are spoken to by their masters, but they are rude to the landlord who is serving the food and drinks they have paid for. The Royal Crescent has slightly come down in the world. It is now a lodging house which Mr. Pickwick hires with 4 of his travelling companions. And there one night he discovers an anonymous manuscript of a romantic alternative version of the Bloodwood story. Apparently, Bloodwood, while he was studying in Athens, fell in love with a beautiful Athenian girl and promised to marry her. However, on his return to England, his father wanted him to marry a neighbouring princess. Bloodwood refused and became a swineherd. One day he heard that his Athenian love had married someone else. Bloodwood was so distressed that he wished to die. His wish was granted. The ground opened up, he fell into the chasm, and it closed up above him, except where his hot tears welled up through the earth and where they have continued to gush forth ever since. Reach for your tissues. As Mr. Pickwick returned the manuscript into its drawer, it might still be there, we never know. And then Bath largely disappeared from the horizon of writers for about 100 years, while its extraordinary Georgian architecture and its reputation for elegance and charm remained preserved. From the middle of the 20th century, Bath resurfaces in 2 very different kinds of popular fiction and in a famous poem. Georgette Heyer, inspired by Jane Austen, set several of her Regency romances in the city. In order to achieve some historical accuracy, she amassed a large collection of documents from the Regency period and kept detailed notes on life among the upper classes. Her writing style is not finely crafted and witty, but her hugely popular romances allowed post-war readers to escape to an age of imagined order, politeness and elegance, with the help of references to political events, social news, and especially details of dress. Bath Tango, published in 1955, is just a random example. Here we have Lady Serena and her recently widowed stepmother, Lady Spenborough, both in their 20s. They take a house in Laura Place in about 1814, in the same period about as Jane Austen's Persuasion is set. They shop in Milsom Street. They visit Duffield's library, that's the one that you can see on Milsom Street in the photo there. And they walk in Sydney Gardens. They even meet Madame d'Arblay, i.e. Fanny Burney, in a shop. They pay their subscriptions for both sets of assembly rooms, yet only attend concerts because they're still officially in mourning. They dutifully drink the water at the pump room, but enjoy the live music and the company much more. And in the end, they each find a suitable husband. The story is slightly disproportionately full of lords and ladies, and unlike most Georgian works, working people are not really given a voice. But it's a good read, and a lot of people have had enjoyment out of them. In the 1960s and 70s, the city of Bath was in danger of losing much of its fine Georgian architecture to modern developments. The conservationists, however, found a champion in the poet and writer John Betjeman. His poem, The Sack of Bath, in 1973, speaks out against the demolition of historic buildings, famously ending in these two lines: "Goodbye to old Bath, we loved you, we who loved you are sorry, they've carted you off by developer's lorry." John Betjeman's composition is very much in the 18th century tradition of satire and rhyming couplets. Since the 1990s, Bath has been the setting for Peter Lovesey's much enjoyed murder mysteries, 19 of them to date, filling a bookcase. All cases are expertly solved by the indomitable, slightly eccentric detective superintendent Peter Diamond, renowned by his fictional professional team for his ability to find a rational scenario for extraordinary events. In spite of his grumbles, he manages his team as well as his superiors with great skill and diplomacy, even though his most recent boss finds him a bumptious, exasperating man, particularly because he keeps asking for extra resources. In the 1990s stories, such as The Last Detective and The Summons, Bath's police station is still in Manvers Street. By his more recent case, Bow Death, the Bath detectives have moved to Concord House in Bristol, much to Peter Diamond's annoyance. Nevertheless, he is called upon to investigate a skeleton found in the attic of an 18th century house under demolition. At first, it is rumoured to be that of Beau Nash. The author has carefully researched the celebrity figure and includes a lot of factual details about him. The plot thickens with the second murder, and the investigation eventually reaches its conclusion after some breathtaking moments. Like all the Peter Diamond novels, Bow Death offers an alternative guided tour around Bath, taking in some of the conventional sites like the Royal Crescent, as well as a few off-the-beaten-track ones. But readers beware, this is a work of fiction, and Peter Lovesey is gifted with powerful imagination. Some of the places mentioned in there and some of the events do not actually exist. And so we have now arrived in the present time, and at the end of our literary journey of Bath through time for now. But who knows? The next great work of literature set at least in part in the city of Bath may be just round the corner. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, that was absolutely lovely, Sabine. That was really, really good. Thoroughly enjoyable. Now, let's see. Have everybody who wants to ask questions, you can now take yourselves off mute and you can go onto a video if you want to. You can leave a question in the chat room, or you can raise a hand. I'm beginning to see a few people. Hello, hello, hello. I can see Michael. I can see Peter Turner, Paul Jackson. There's a gorgeous dog. Somebody, Linda, that's a very nice dog. Anne, I can see an Anne. I don't. Oh, there's the dog's moved. Oh, I've got Marion McNair. Hello, Marion. I've got a message here from Joan Reynolds. Thank you. That was comprehensive and fascinating. I absolutely agree. Now, does anybody have a question? Madam Mayor, do you have a question?
I've got a bit of a comment. I was a bit worried at the beginning of the talk that everyone had to have 5 husbands in order to live in Bath, and I think I'm probably bringing the average down slightly. It's a little bit of a worry for me. So, no, I look forward to hearing other people's questions. I'd like to make a couple of comments at the end, if I may, Diane.
Yes, you certainly may. Right, well, David, have you got a question? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
No, I just wanted to ask about the new Bath Guide and Christopher Anse at number 4 Royal Crescent. I believe, and Sabine, who is also connected with number 1, like me, is probably aware that he was one of the people who objected violently when there was a move to develop the land in front of the Royal Crescent, which is now Royal Victoria Park. And he took great umbrance to that because it would spoil their view. And apparently he went off and took a house instead down at Marlborough Buildings as a protest out of the Royal Crescent. I don't know if Sabine's heard that.
I didn't know that, but I'm always grateful to your little additional pieces of knowledge.
Absolutely. Paul, yes. We can't hear you, Paul. You've got to unmute yourself.
Right. Try
That's
again.
it.
Sorry. I'll get the hang of this. That was
Don't worry.
Thank you very much. And it was a good run through. I've got a couple more books, actually. I mean, this one, which is Wideacre. It's Philip Gregory's first novel, published, I don't know when, it's probably in the 1990s, but that has a chapter in Bath as well.
Okay.
And that might be one to add to your list. But also I'd mention, and it's not so much a novel, but it's an entertaining read, the books by Philip Thickness, which he wrote various Bath guides. The last one, the Valetudinarian Bath Guide, I find it fascinating. And now I'm going to crave your indulgence, because this book, After Taking the Waters, came out just before Christmas, written by myself. And it's all set in Bath. And so you ended up saying maybe there's another masterpiece, or words to this effect, maybe there's another masterpiece waiting out there. So here's hoping. It's on Amazon. I haven't publicised it properly yet, so I'm giving everyone a sneak preview. I'm trying to get it into Mr. B's. We had discussions today, and I'm really waiting for COVID to finish before I start telling people about it. But anyway, there it is. Added to the literature that there is on Bath. The whole novel is set in Bath, which is unusual because most of the other ones have chapters in Bath, but they also have chapters elsewhere, whereas this is virtually all in Bath. And the whole plot revolves around Bath as well.
Well, thank you very much for that, Paul. Now, do we have any more questions? Anne, yes? Are you here, Anne, in Bath, in England? Anne Penang? No.
Could you unmute yourself? Could you?
Yes. If you're going to ask a question, can you unmute yourself? I don't think.
It looks mystified.
Right. Well, Eric, let's move to something. I've had a few comments thanking you, Sabine, being a very interesting talk. People have been putting little messages in the chat room. And did I see somebody else put up their hand? Anybody? I can't see everybody, you see. This is the thing.
I have another one, but
David, right?
Get cut. I've had my turn. If somebody else wants to have a turn.
Well, we weren't waiting for Anne, but she couldn't.
Can we tell Anne to unmute herself?
Yes, I think hasn't quite got it. Never mind.
I think you always have valuable things to say, so I'm sure we're delighted to hear you.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, is that me? I don't.
Yeah, that's you, David.
Yes,
go ahead.
A lovely anecdote about Miss Snapper and the Adventures of Roderick Random, and about Bo Nash being a dog.
Yes.
I think that plays on the word for dog as being a very low servant, and it comes from King Charles's spaniels when he lived out at the Royal Palace at Kew Gardens, what's now Kew Gardens, and the spaniel had a tag on it, its name tag, to show who its owner was, and it says, "I am His Majesty's dog at Kew. Pray, sir, whose dog are you?"
Oh yes, I remember that from
Excellent.
somewhere. Yeah,
Thank you for that.
absolutely. Yeah. Right. Any more questions? Anybody got any comments? Yes, Peter.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
As you went through, and thank you so much, Sabine, that was very informative and most delightful. I was reminded of Bridgerton as you went through, and how representative of Bath do you think that was? I suppose apart from I won't say the word anyway. Yeah, sorry.
I haven't actually as yet watched it, I have to honestly admit. I know that we were in part expelled from bits of number 1 Royal Crescent while it was being filmed. We had the pleasure of seeing the difficult decisions of the front door being painted and then the paint being stripped off again. But beyond that, I'm afraid. I also saw Bath while it was being filmed, but I haven't actually seen the finished product.
I saw about 5 minutes of it, and I decided that was enough.
I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
I watched the whole series. I was shamed into it by my daughters because, as number 1, the Royal Crescent, I had been, I'd seen so much of it being filmed. I was deeply, deeply insulting about it, frivolous.
Not surprised.
Nonsense. But actually, it's quite a lot of fun. As long as you don't take it too seriously and you don't get nitpicking about the manners and the language and the costumes and the decor and the behavior, as long as you don't care about any of those things, it's quite good fun. Quite raunchy as well in places.
Yes.
I've got a comment here from Jackie's iPad. To everyone, thank you. What an excellent speaker and an excellent talk. From Joan Reynolds. What was the name of that book? Now, what book are we talking about, Joan? Which book do you mean? Take yourself off mute.
The one that Peter was talking about. He mentioned a couple, but it was the first one.
By Philip Gregory, that one? I didn't hear the name either.
Oh, sorry, that was me. It's called Wideacre. And it's
Wideacre.
It's Philip Gregory's first book. I think it's her first book. But she said
there we are.
Century, and I read it when it came out, and I thought it was a great book. It's about 600 pages long, and I know she's got a section set in Bath, but it's only part of the book rather than the whole book. And the other one I mentioned, which I'll plug again if I may, is this one, After Taking the Waters. So it's After Taking the Waters, and it's me, Paul Jackson.
I've got a comment here from Marion McNair. Thanks, Sabine, for a great talk. Morag Joss wrote a series of detective books set in Bath and even Eyford Manor. The first was Funeral Music. Great fun. So that's something that we ought perhaps to get hold of. Funeral
Yes, I read
Music.
that one. That was good. That was very good.
That was very good. Who's read that?
Phyllis in Canada. And it features 2 cellists, and it has some. It's quite interesting.
Oh right. Are you in Canada now?
I'm in Vancouver, and so is Joan.
Oh,
we're with the Jane Austen Society in Vancouver. So.
Oh, how lovely! Well, it's lovely to have you here. I've got another comment here from Hannah Erdley. Thank you very much. Somebody else. An iPad. Wonderful talk, Sabine. Thank you. Lovely talk. Thank you. Victoria's iPad. Thank you. Super talk. When I moved here, a friend gave me a present of Bath by Edith Sitwell. As you'd expect, very eccentric. So I haven't actually read Edith Sitwell's book on Bath, but I'm sure it is eccentric.
Diana,
is that Jutta? Is that?
Can I ask a question?
Sorry?
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Yes, of course you may.
So I'm Catherine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. I can't see you.
So I'm a bit dark, aren't I, in the corner?
Oh, there you are. Right, Catherine Laycott. Right, hello.
Yes. Hi, hello. I just wanted to say, Sabine, how much I enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
Least for the, it came across as a sort of historical pageant in a way, didn't it? All the different periods that the city has gone through. And I just wondered whether you have a favourite period of that story in which you would most like to have lived, whether it was at the peak of its elegance or perhaps during some of the other periods that you referred to.
I think I'm quite happy to live at the time that I am living, I have to honestly admit, having had the chance to read all these and reread these stories again and just see the city reflected in the past. It's taught me a lot, and also, of course, a lot of the quotes that I've given you there show that basically when visitors come to Bath, they don't change all that much in principle in the way they behave. So you still find people going around the pump room and looking at each other and in the assembly rooms. And it's the basic behavior of humans hasn't altered that much. So for me,
it's not a little marriage market going on.
No, I don't think it's a marriage market anymore.
Marriage market, perhaps not so much. And maybe the gambling of card sharps is not quite so in evidence anymore.
I love the book, Evelina. When you were talking about Evelina, I think that must be one of the funniest books I've ever read, considering it was written in the 18th century. It's just hilarious. Oh, Michael. Yes, Michael.
There's 88 people at the talk tonight, which is remarkable. And most of them are still invisible and muted, but it might be interesting to find out if there are people here from far-flung places, like, for example, the lady from Vancouver. Perhaps we could ask if people from well outside Bath can unmute themselves and make themselves visible. I think it would be quite interesting to know that, really.
Can you hear me? I'm Victoria's iPad.
I can indeed.
Yeah, I've got this little thing. I want to be visible. I don't want to be incognito, but I keep getting a thing which says the person in charge has basically, turned off your video. Oh, here we are. It's asked me to start my video.
Right. Yes, okay.
There we are. I'm here now.
Hello.
I suspect that's happened to quite a few people. I'm the one with the Edith Sitwell book on Bath.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah,
What's the title of that
1932.
Well, perhaps the person in charge could unmute people and make them visible.
He has now. She's unmuted now. She's okay. I've got some more questions here. Thank you from Bernadette. I thank you for a thoughtful and informative talk. Interested to hear that Bridgerton was only raunchy in parts. Oh, did you think all of it was going to be then? Mary Fagan says, thank you for an excellent talk. Jonathan Hope, has anyone researched the history of Bath in illustrated books for children and others? So that's an interesting one. Has anybody done that? Children's books about Bath? I'm sure there must be.
When they do, can they please give a talk to Rosie?
Yes. Jonathan, yes? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes, it's not something I have researched myself, but I'm very interested in it. So I may well do that at some point in the future.
I do know that Graham Oakley lived quite near, and he did illustrated children's books about the church cat and the church mice. But I don't think, yes, but I don't think it was about Bath. I don't think he actually wrote about Bath. But he certainly lived quite near.
This is much nicer seeing everyone now.
It is nice, isn't it? Yeah. Somebody called Jay Linden. Oh, this is the dog. This is the lovely dog. He's got to dash, but he enjoyed the talk. Anybody else?
Well, yes, the majority.
Oh, yes, hang on. I've got Anne. Anne, I can't pronounce your name.
Yeah, it's all right. You can call me Anne Brannigan.
It's just Anne. And anyway,
yes, that's
she
fine.
said, thank you for a lovely talk.
Thank you. Oh, that's another Anne then.
Yeah, to Sabine, what did you find most surprising in your research?
That's my question.
That's from Anne.
What did I find the most surprising? There were a couple of titles that I'd heard of before and had never read. And one of them was actually The Female Quixote, which I found really surprising. What I found surprising there was how sort of tongue-in-cheek even a lady in the middle of the 18th century could write and have a work published as well, even with part of her name on the title page. And just each chapter heading is just showing you that she's just basically making fun of everything and everybody, and that's this Arabella person. I think that was my most surprising find, actually.
I think it was one of the most liberating things for women, that they could actually, in the 18th century, they could be a bit humorous. They could really take the mickey out of life. They seem to, at that period, they seem to be able to do it, whereas you get into Victorian times and it wasn't possible.
Yes. Yeah. But even also the early play, I hadn't ever heard of before, the 1701 play. And again, to see how much people made fun of each other and politically correct was not really a concept that they had to abide by, even though, of course, they were censored. But just the sheer rowdiness of the fun was just incredible. It was just incredibly experienced how satirical you were allowed to be, and how much of that fun is still funny today as well.
I've got to plug myself in. My battery's running low.
I know. I think Betty Sushar would like to ask a question.
Oh, right. Yes, go on, Betty.
Well, I was just going to mention a book that I knew about called The Golden House by Horace Vatchell, and it's about Whitcomb Manor.
Oh.
The story is set in Whitcomb Manor.
Oh, that's the most beautiful house.
Yeah, and his dates were 1861 to 1955, so it can fit in your 20th century.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another one to read. Golly, the list is growing.
Could you repeat the name of that author again, please?
Please.
Yeah, Horace Vatchell, Vachell.
Thank you.
Somebody called Turquoise Gwyn. What a lovely name. Sorry, she can't unmute. I'm in the classroom here in Southern California near Disneyland. But I enjoyed the lecture. She's an English teacher for secondary school. How lovely.
Unbelievable.
Diana, 2/3 of the people here are still invisible and muted. I suspect they're en masse switched off. So perhaps, can we not unmask them and make them audible?
Well, if they don't want to.
Well, I think if they don't want to.
You've just picked up somebody from California. It's very interesting to know.
It is. It's very interesting that we've got people from, this is something that we discovered. They would never be able to get them to a live talk in the centre, in the institution. Madam Mayor, have you got anything you would like to say? I haven't given you much chance yet.
Thank you. That's really, really kind of you. My favourite book ever is Persuasion by Jane Austen.
Yeah.
And I reread it on a yearly basis. And if you don't tell on me, this is my copy that I've had since 1979.
Oh,
that I know I've had it since 1979 is that it's still got a stamp in it from my school.
Oh, how sweet. gosh, that's lovely.
I should probably return it. I mean, my first thought is, Sabine, that was just miraculously wonderful. I loved it. You covered so much time and so much material. It was a fantastic, fantastic presentation. I'm pleased that it's been recorded, because I think I might want to listen to it again, because I'm sure there are things that I sort of heard but didn't entirely take in. The other bits that struck me as really interesting, I think Peter Turner mentioned, first of all, he mentioned Bridgerton. If we were having this kind of talk in maybe another 20 years' time, I think it wouldn't just be about written literature we'd be talking more about visual art. Because for those of you, I don't know if you will watch the first series, but the second series of MacDonald and Dodds just finished filming and is starting, I believe, this weekend. You didn't necessarily enjoy the plot, but Bath as a city looked absolutely, well, it looked the city that we all love. And on that, I'm aware that there are at least 2 ex-mayors on here. And the other thing that really struck me is we're surrounded by history. I'm number 793. And, you know, so the mayoralty has been going longer than any of the bits of literature that we just referenced. And certainly, as part of my creative writing MA, I too am doing a novel. I've not done it as well as Paul Jackson because I'm not yet published. And the more that I'm doing it, I think I may have to do it anonymously. Otherwise, I'm not going to make many friends. But it is set in Bath because it's such a wonderful place to do it. The other thing I'd like to say, if you'll just indulge me for a second, is my theme for the year was about combating loneliness. And I think something like this, and I think Brisley has now done, I think I'm right in saying, Betty, something like 100 of these kind of talks. The content tonight was absolutely amazing, but actually the very fact that under these very peculiar circumstances, you put the effort in to do something like this, to bring people together. And actually, as you said before, the fact that people from all around the world can join in a way that they possibly couldn't have done had it been a physical meeting, I think is to your credit. And one of the pleasures of being the mayor of Bath is you're allowed to use the phrase "on behalf of the city of Bath." So employ it right now. You know, on behalf of the city of Bath, what you have done this evening and what you have continued to do to reach out and keep your coffee mornings going, do stuff like that, is so appreciated. You should all be incredibly proud of yourselves. So give yourselves a good round of applause, frankly.
Yes, it looks like you're getting a round of applause too. Well, that's lovely. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And can I just say that we've got Joan Reynolds, who's, I'm not quite sure where she is, but she's saying one thing about, sorry, where are you?
Canada. Phyllis and I are both from Vancouver.
Right, well, that's what she's saying, that that's absolutely 5 a.m. is a tad early, but this one is just right. So we must try and remember 7:30 is all right for Vancouver.
I listened to the Archers at 7.
Yeah.
So this gives me enough time to finish listening to the Archers on the internet.
Yeah.
And come back for whatever is on. So perfect.
I've got another little message here from Turquoise Gwyn, who's saying that the kids are testing. So she's sorry, that's why she has to be quiet. Right, well, I think I think we've probably got, everybody's had their question now. Can I just thank you very much, Madam Mayor, for coming. We really appreciated it. And we're really pleased that you've enjoyed it. And a big, big thank you to Sabine for giving us a really interesting talk. Absolutely lovely and thoroughly enjoyable. Everybody's clapping like mad. You can't hear them, but you can see them. So thank you very, very much.
Lovely. Thank you.
And thank you, Andreas, behind the scenes for getting everybody in and out and all of the technical stuff, because we really do need that. So our next talk, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be, where are we? It's going to be April the 17th. That's a Saturday, and it's going to be at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I hope that fits in with everybody. And it's going to be Jane Austen's time in Reading, when she was at school in Reading. And the speaker is going to be Mark Burgess, who is very well known on the Jane Austen circuit. So I do hope we'll see some of you for that. And until the next time, thank you all very, very much for coming, and take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.